I got two screens. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're running for
Councilperson in
District 3. That's what I was trying to remember. District 3. First and foremost, why are you running, and why should the people vote for you?
Thank you for that question. The reason why I decided to run for councilperson in District 3 is that I've been living in New Rochelle for most of my life and raised here in New Rochelle. Mm-hmm. And New Rochelle over the years has been a city that has many strengths that are oftentimes talked about in relationship to the diversity and a lot of reasons for why people come to New Rochelle. But in relationship to District 3 in particular, there are also many challenges that historically have remained in place, whether those challenges were challenges associated with housing, whether those challenges were associated with having an opportunity for economic viability vis-a-vis businesses being within the district. You know, there was a time when
pull the mic closer.
There was a time when these things existed within District 3, particularly within the Lincoln Avenue corridor, if you will.
Right.
And then historically, they were removed with the installation of 95 highway, right? And so
I just want to say, full disclosure, in my misspent youth, I'm a graduate of UCLA, the University of the corner of Lincoln Avenue.
So, so you know, right? So you know. So I guess I'm saying all that to say that I have a stake in this particular community.
Yes.
And the other reason why wanting to run is because District 3 also doesn't have contiguous boundaries, meaning that it's a very wide district, and so with respect to that, there's an opportunity to, in this transformative time, to really try to move towards having collective impact. And what I mean by collective impact is the opportunity to be engaged not only in the community that I was initially describing, but also within our historic district, within District 3, and in other areas within District 3 where class and race sort of merge at times. Mm-hmm. And so the tension of that sort of merging mm-hmm. of ideas and thoughts and desires and needs, I really want to participate in being able to pull that together collectively, and not necessarily have a district that is thinking about so many different ways of functioning, particularly within the city of New Rochelle.
Now the district has come, again, I've spent a lot of time, was a member of St. Catherine. My mother and my stepmother both were members. My brother, my stepmother's family grew up in 33, and my brother's father had a print shop on North and Lincoln, right on the corner there. Right. So, you know, and then 95, we've had the functions in 95.
That's right. So you're familiar with
the whole thing. The boys club, that whole area.
Right.
So
That's right.
Yeah. So, well, one thing I ask everybody, and I sometimes forget at the end, so let's get that out the way. People are going to see you for the first time, hear you for the first time. How do they get in touch with you? Is there a website? They want to know more about you, volunteer to your campaign, donate or something. Website, social media?
Well, the website that we have up right now is in terms of Facebook is Friends of David Peters on Facebook.
Okay.
All right, so I can be accessed in that particular way. But the other piece of it, too, in getting in touch with me is I'm really interested in getting in touch with people. So as they begin to do that, I'm very much interested in getting out into District 3 and having meet and greets and talking with people. You know, I kind of want to be able to define my own narrative, if you will, and sometimes people have different pieces of who you might be without having an opportunity to talk to you. So I'm constituency based, right? I'm a community organizer. I've been engaged and involved in a number of activities.
We share a common friend, Sandy Barnaby.
Correct. That's right. So we share that particular
She's a good friend of the show, yes.
Absolutely. You know, so I believe in talking to people and embracing the tension that that dialogue might bring with the opportunities that I think emerge from that is really why I want to be able to talk to people and to spend time with people and to let them know how I think about this district. I think in New Rochelle in particular, we're in a very transformative time. This has not, what's happening now around the development will probably change New Rochelle for the next 100 years, to be quite frank with you. And so with respect to that, with the current council person deciding that he's not going to continue to run, I really felt compelled that this was a
Shout to Jared Rice.
Around Jared Rice, right?
Good friend of the show, yeah.
Absolutely. So that this was a time really to emerge in a way in which hopefully the kind of things that I think a lot about and other people that I talk with will have an opportunity for that to happen.
Now, what would you say are maybe some of the biggest issues District 3 is facing, and what will you do to make it better?
Well, from the point of view that I have around District 3 is one of the things that I'm very much interested in is equity and inclusion, right? So a couple of years ago when the city began its campaign to have more community involvement in relationship to what this development could look like, I began to organize with a number of other people around trying to ensure that a community benefits agreement would come out of this so that the developers, such as they might be, were not the only individuals who were pretty much making out really well as in relationship to everything that's happening in New Rochelle, right? So I was very much interested in that. I was interested in local hire, that people who live in New Rochelle, who may be working or may not, have an opportunity to participate within the economic renaissance such as is being described by the city. I was also interested in union jobs, and let me be real clear around this, around union jobs. Part of my interest with respect to that was that in learning about the development process here in New Rochelle, it was real clear to me that 95% of the development that was going on, and they'll tell you this themselves, was non-union work, right? And so with regards to the middle class opportunities that exist with union construction and development, it was important for me to be engaged with the unions in some fashion, to begin that kind of conversation. Now the unions, by and large, historically, haven't necessarily been the best friends in relationship to the communities that I'm talking about in terms of inclusion and access. But what I came to find out was that at this moment in time, they are clearly engaged and involved and want to be involved with community groups. So in reaching out to them, we talked a little bit about a pre-apprenticeship program. And that pre-apprenticeship program, if and when development is associated with unions having that particular job, that they will green light individuals directly into the unions through a apprenticeship program. So that was important. What that does, not only does it allow for people who are currently in New Rochelle, where there are many people who are union workers who live in New Rochelle but are not involved in these developments. So for me, it just didn't make sense. It was difficult for me to understand how we would not want to have local hire happening in New Rochelle, how we wouldn't want to have an opportunity for adults who are engaged and involved and not working to be able to be engaged and involved more effectively. To me, that was really an important thing that needed to happen. The other part of this that was important for me in terms of all of this stuff was that we began to look at housing and affordable housing that was not, that was able for people to live there to be able to stay there. So part of what many people's concerns are in District 3 in particular is that they don't necessarily be gentrified out of the process of being able to stay in New Rochelle, you know, and that's a concern. You know, the word gentrification is oftentimes used, and what happens with that word is that it brings in a lot of fear and anger and concerns. And so what I hope to be able to bring to the table is a more measured response around affordability and the things along those lines. So I was very much interested in that around housing. The other thing that not only myself but others were very much concerned about was also to begin to think about how can we frame the way in which these benefits outreach and extend into our youth within the community. So we were very much interested in thinking about that, and so part of the community benefits that we talked about was the development of a youth center or some youth capacity for things. You know, we wanted that to be able to happen. The other thing is that we were interested in conversations not only with the city but also with the developers, and so part of the work that I've been engaged and involved in is to meet directly with another group of people around meeting with RXR as a master developer to begin to have conversations that might also create additional opportunities for these things to happen. So there are a number of ways in which points of entry need to occur around this transformation. And part of what I think and know that I bring to the table is an opportunity and a mind to consider implementation science and to consider how to get things done. But more importantly, I'm constituency based. I'm interested in relationships that exist between community members, government, and private entities. I don't believe that our current model of governance is as effective for the times that we're describing, such as it is right now. So that's a part of it as well.
So can you just elaborate a little bit more on exactly what the current model of governance looks like in New Rochelle and I guess by extension other municipalities in Westchester County, and what it is lacking that you think is kind of off the mark and that you're hoping your candidacy, if you're successful, is going to rectify?
Well, I think from my point of view, the biggest part of this has been around community engagement. And I think the governance model associated with how things have occurred in New Rochelle have been mostly limited to the fact that we have a city council and the mayor who decide around the policies and practices and make decisions around the direction that New Rochelle needs to go in. And in relationship to that, we have various ways in which those decisions finally happen. And one of the things that I believe has not necessarily been as effective as it could be was to begin to listen to the community itself, right? And to be not fearful of a model of innovation that comes out of the members of the community itself. And I think that for whatever reason over time, what I've sensed is that there's been a fear of that innovative sort of spirit of what communities bring to the table. And so it's been very challenging to be able to get the city to consider and to think about these things in that way. And so what happens is that there's, you wind up having a lot of frustration around things that happen. There's not a level of transparency in partnership in getting things done. So the governance model that I'm describing is a partnership model in which community engagement has a real stake in what's happening in the particular district that I'm interested in now as running for council person there, but also for the city of New Rochelle as a whole. I just believe that overall, that kind of a model has not been utilized as effectively as it could be.
Right. So now you mentioned the issue of equity and gentrification as being
Mostly equity and inclusion.
Equity and inclusion and the
What's the difference
possible-
between inclusion and gentrification?
What's the difference between inclusion
Yeah.
and gentrification? Well, I think when we talk about the term gentrification historically has been defined as a process where individuals who have been outside of a particular community and within the dominant class, however that's being defined, enter into a historical area, and entering into that historical area, they bring in resources and begin to change the overarching cultural way in which people who live in the community have come to live and the way in which they live their lives out. In relationship to that, what it does is that you're bringing in people who perhaps can afford to change the way in which businesses change, that were there before are no longer there. Other types of businesses come in. Oftentimes the rates for housing goes up, and before you know it, the way of life in which people live in terms of how they've come to understand their community has all of a sudden seemed to disappear. It becomes invisible. And so the gentrification of the neighborhood speaks to a changing of the way in which the neighborhood is constructed and historically has been able to maintain a way of life. When you're talking about inclusion, the difference is, as I'm understanding and as I think about it, is that inclusion means what I was talking about earlier about being more involved in the governance model, being more engaged on the impact, the collective impact of the decisions that are occurring from the standpoint of the city along the way. And so inclusion means to be more engaged on the needs of the constituency in which are represented, in this case by District 3.
I'm sorry, and I interrupted Bob. His question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's all right. So I wanted to know what other issues besides the issue of equity, youth development, and gentrification do you think has gone unaddressed by the dominant model of governance, and that your alternative that makes inclusion of the community, voices of the community more central, what issues do you think will be captured if you're elected and are able to persuade the rest of your colleagues to move to a more kind of inclusive?
Right. Well, one of the things that caught my attention in New Rochelle, and this may be the case in other cities, I'm not sure, but we have in New Rochelle, we have a school board and school situation where the school board in New Rochelle really manages whatever goes on around the schools and education within the city of New Rochelle. And the city of New Rochelle, separate from that, manages the city for the most part with a city manager involved, right? With this new development, one of the things that has come up, quite frankly, has been the sense that what's going to happen with children coming in, perhaps with new kids coming in, not having necessarily schools that are available to meet the needs of new children coming into the school system, right? And so one of the things that I'm very much interested in is to begin to consider that there needs to be more of a dialogue between the city and the school board around the decisions that need to be made around what's going to be happening with our schools. When I go around and talk to people around running for as city councilman, what comes up more often than not has not been the development. It hasn't been local hire. It hasn't been a sense of affordable housing. The thing most on the minds of the constituents in the city of New Rochelle is what's going on with our schools, right? And so we have a model that doesn't necessarily speak to that sort of integration and thinking in a transparent way around what could occur. And so I believe that that's an important area if I'm able to become a councilman that I want to be engaged in. I also think that one of the areas that I'd like to be involved in is around interrupting the poverty that exists within the city of New Rochelle. Within District 3 and some of our other districts, New Rochelle is a city where we have people who are not faring as well as some of the other individuals who live in New Rochelle, right? And I think that one of the things that I like to see happen is to interrupt poverty in a different way. And what I mean by that is that I'd like to reimagine, if elected council person, I'd like to convene the various service providers and all of the other individuals who are in New Rochelle, who are engaged, involved with many who exist in our communities, and to begin to think about what are some more transformative ways that we can expand on really reaching deeply into some of the situations that are occurring. And from that context, part of my work life has exposed me to something that's called generational responses, where you're looking at not only responding to generations that might be involved in front of you, but also thinking about the impact that have occurred historically, whether it's with their grandmother or whether it's with their great-grandmother or their aunt, and to look at things from a two-gen perspective as opposed to one. So these are some of the things as a social worker that I've been exposed to and want to be able to bring to the city.
I have to say that your remarks about the imbalance between the expansion of the residency of New Rochelle and the failure of the school district to begin to put in place adequate provisions for a growing population.
I want to be careful not necessarily to characterize it as a failure,
Mhm.
because they operate on very separate tracks.
Right.
So in relationship to that, when you ask me about a governance model, I'm not suggesting that somehow, some way, they all of a sudden continue to work independent of each other. What I am suggesting is that I think moving forward that there needs to be a closer relationship between the two.
Right.
Right, in order to bring about some changes that I think could be effective for the district. Children in District 3 and in other districts have been bussed outside of their district for over 50 years, right? And we have a city and we have a school system that basically we have individuals who are living, quite frankly, in segregated places and spaces in many cases.
Right.
And so my sense of this is as we are thinking about new developments, as we're looking at new things, ultimately we're going to need to look at how can we create a new school that somehow changes the arrangement that has existed for these years that hasn't been as effective as it could have been. So I'm interested in that as well.
Okay.
Anything I haven't asked you that you want people to know about you? As a candidate, as a person?
Well, I think as a person, one of the things that I think is important is that you know that I'm very transparent around information, and that I'm very much interested in how people think and how people feel, and I'm very interested in being available for dialogue and discussion along the way. A big part of what I talk to people about is that if in fact I'm elected as your council person, I will not be an individual who, as a council person, is thinking that the ideas or what needs to happen are based solely on how I think about things. In fact, I'm going to actually make demands of the community itself. Right? I'm going to want them to show up. I'm going to want them to be engaged. I'm going to be involved. I'm a person that does not want to operate from a standpoint of thinking that I know what's best for the community. And so what I want the community to understand and what I want the district to understand, which is a very diverse district, is that I'm very much interested in marshaling what they think, in meeting their needs, particularly in the districts that's as flexible and as diverse as District 3. So that's what I'd like you to know, that I'm very transparent and open to dialogue and discussion and listening and bringing these eyes together so that we can have collective impact within the district itself.
That's what's up. That's what's up. So again, remind everybody where you're running, what district you're running in, and how people can get in touch with you.
I'm running in District 3 in the city of New Rochelle for a council person there. You can get in touch with me through Friends of David Peters via Facebook. And you can, and that's the best way actually to be able to reach me at this particular time.
Okay.
I'm very visible within the community, and I'm around quite a bit in the various churches and throughout the district in many ways. And I'm looking forward over the next 20 days to meet as many people as possible to talk a little bit about my candidacy and what I can bring to the table.
Well, we definitely thank you for coming through. We definitely wish you luck on your candidacy and your run. And if you win, we'd like to have you come back on and talk about, some of the situations, your first 100 days, what you want to do, and whatever issues there are in Rochelle, and come back through.
Because is there one last thing that I could say?
Oh, absolutely.
If at all possible.
Not a problem.
Part of what I want people to know about me is basically three things. That in my work within the city of New Rochelle, as a person that's been organizing within the community, there have been three things that I've brought to New Rochelle that have been institutionalized within New Rochelle, currently coming from that model that I'm describing. One is that I was able to bring My Brother's Keeper to New Rochelle. I brought that to our current council person. I brought that to the Board of Ed, and I initiated the discussions around the implementation of My Brother's Keeper within the city of New Rochelle.
I sat in those first meetings on Jared's invitation at the high school when all the groups came together, and before the mayor took the pledge and everything, I sat in.
Right,
in
but
those meetings,
prior to that, the whole idea of My Brother's Keeper, and that's why I'm mentioning it in terms of leading these efforts, was something that I brought to them and brought them together in order to initiate this process for that to happen. That's number one. The second thing in New Rochelle has been institutionalized primarily on the efforts, again, from the community impact in my engagement, has been around something that was called the Youth Police Initiative, which the city of New Rochelle decided to invest in, which was bringing together police officers and community leaders, training. I personally trained the community leaders and the police officers throughout the city of New Rochelle in creating a community policing model that was to be utilized throughout the city of New Rochelle and has been institutionalized there as well. The third thing that has been institutionalized, as I mentioned before, and this was with the school board, that I led efforts in relationship to returning to the Lincoln Avenue District school board meetings that had not occurred in the Lincoln Avenue District in District 3 for over 50 years. And the efforts of myself and others have now institutionalized that as part of the fabric of the city of New Rochelle. So the point that I'm making and the model that I'm describing and the work that I'm able to do and have demonstrated to be able to do is that the ideas and the implementation science around causing things to happen have been institutionalized in the city of New Rochelle from the outside already. So imagine the kind of work that I would be engaged in if I became council person for New Rochelle as well. So thank you for your time.
Definitely. Like I said, an open door. I'd like to see you
Absolutely.
come back after you win and continue this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Look forward to it.
All right.
All
Yes,
right,
Brother
thank you.
Peters. Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
All
Good
right.
luck with everything.
Thank you.
That was New Rochelle City Council candidate David Peters running for City Council in District 3 with the seat currently held by Councilman Jared Rice, who is not running for re-election.